talking a lot about adapting the written word recently with Wuthering Heights, a book brought to the big screen where many fans of the source material felt it had been stripped of all its deeper meaning. And I think that's very interesting because one of the most charming things about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is that it feels so much like a novella brought to life. From the visuals, I think the original illustrations helped a lot to set the tone when they were making this show. And I saw a couple of the cast members say they took inspiration from the illustrations. To the incredible job that showrunner Ira Parker has done both capturing and expanding upon George R.R. Martin's original source material. And of course, this mini-series, well, season 1, 6 short 30-minute episodes, is dripping with deeper meaning, which I'm so excited to discuss with you. Oh, the feels. So what exactly is a Targaryen? As I rewatched this first season to do this notes for this spoiler review, that question really jumped out at me, right? Like, up until now, they've been these like almost mythological creatures with cool white hair, you know, the chosen ones who to rule and to have control over dragons. But here, I think we really started to look at them in earnest, you know, with their flaws as well. And I think that's fascinating. And then also the other question is what makes a good knight? And in both cases, you have the pinnacle of nobility, the Targaryen line, and also the pinnacle for regular men, being a knight. And of course, one of those questions is for Dunk, and one of those questions is for Egg. Oh, it's beautiful. We're going to talk about the season as a whole in the spoiler review for the season, but I'm so glad that the show is now popular. So going forward, I can break it down episode to episode. But this show got off to a little bit of a slow start. It was a leap of faith, although I think the binge effect for this show is going to be substantial because it's so good. But going forward now, everybody knows it's a hot show. But of course, first off, I want to talk about that ending, which you just watched. So good. So 2 incredible moments at the very end of this season finale, both new and added from the source material. So at least for now, George R.R. Martin is very happy with the changes that Ira Parker is doing. All right, these some butterfly wings are flapping, and George R.R. Martin's liking the ripples. All right, so the first is more subtle. It's the spirit of Sir Arlan of Pennytree, or at least Dunk's memory of him. I think it's somewhere in between. Finally riding off, his path finally truly splitting from Dunk. And Dunk, though, not resisting one last glance. I was going to say he stole a last glance, but I don't think Dunk would ever steal anything. And as Dunk and Egg's journey is truly officially beginning. I thought that was just beautiful. And I think this first season, when you look back at it, is very much about the end of the relationship between a knight and his squire, that squire coming to terms with it and becoming a knight himself, and a new squire entering the picture to take the former squire's place. It's really George R.R. Martin's circle of life, if you will. And that's beautiful. And I also, though, think that speaks a little bit to why Sir Arlan wouldn't knight Dunk. And we're going to talk about that in this breakdown. And then our little mid-credit scene, which changes so much. It's short, but just such a huge change to the story. In the original novella, Maekar Targaryen agrees to having Dunk take Egg on the road. You know, he doesn't actually say anything, but when Dunk points out his other sons are a huge mess, he just leaves and is like, yeah, you know, is basically like, yeah, maybe we should try something different with this one. Here, of course, he says, this is my last son, almost as if it's his last chance to get it right, which is very interesting. Bad parenting. He's making it about himself and not about his kid. But I mean, you can understand a parent's selfishness in that moment. But here, he does not agree to it, as we find out. And Egg, it's very Home Alone, by the way. Kevin, Egg, where is he? How does he not know that his son is missing for so long until they're all packed up and on the road? I thought that was very funny. And you know, Egg's a little Kevin McAllister. He's very precocious. I like that. But Egg lied again. he lied again. And that Dunk is once again put in danger as now an enemy of the Targaryen family. And they're going to send somebody to hunt him down, which is a huge change because that never happened in the source material. So I'm very curious to see where they take this. So yes, what is a Targaryen? Let's address that question first. Aeg is so terrified of becoming a Targaryen, which he feels his brother Aerion personifies, that in the season finale, when he sees his white hair beginning to grow back, such a powerful moment. You can't deny who you are, little man. So he sneaks into his brother's bedchamber to kill him himself. He's been trying to get someone to kill Aerion all season long. Part of why he ran to Dunk instead of his uncle when Tamzil was being attacked was because he felt Dunk was very likely would kill Aerion in that fight. So very interesting. But he's like, this has to be done. And he's only stopped when he I think he does stop himself for a moment because I think he's still fighting his nature. But his father is already in the room. What a cry for help to want to kill his own brother. And in some ways, to kill the idea of what he himself could become. Like as if Aerion is some sort of ghost or a malevolent force. To kill his own future. Like the dark fortune, speaking of futures, that he's told earlier in the season. You know, when that happened, some felt that was a spoiler. And they were like, why would the show do that? But, you know, obviously, George R.R. Martin is allowing changes to be made, so you never know totally for sure what's going to happen, especially because the story of Dunk and Aeg, we know what happens to Aeg, and that fortune teller got it right, but we don't know the complexities of it, right? I mean, George R.R. Martin's only written 3 official stories, although he has ideas and outlines for others that he's shared with showrunner Ira Parker. But anyway, I think that telling that fortune is it's a warning to not just Aeg, but us, that as nice as he might be in the moment, he's still a Targaryen. Don't forget that. That's what was so interesting to me rewatching these episodes. You know, he's such a cute little boy, and he's so nice most of the time. But there are moments. Although I will say that, they say monsters are made, and, I don't think that, well, let me explain. So, neither his own father nor his uncle Baelor, for all the good things everyone says about Baelor, is willing to help Aeg, even though, again, he's crying out for help. And perhaps that's why the gods sided with Dunk in the Trial of 7, which we will also discuss. I do think the gods were at play there. But also, let's not forget that despite all of his efforts to distance himself from his family, Aeg is a Targaryen, and he does Targaryen things. He's not as honorable as Dunk, and he lies several times throughout this season, including at the very end, so he hasn't learned. He's still lying and putting people in danger. He's putting Dunk in great danger by lying to him saying that he has his father's permission to go with him. And Aeg is doing these things to further his own agenda. He's not even trying to help anyone else. It's to help himself. And that couldn't be more opposite than Dunk. He even tells little lies, something I picked up on again in my rewatch, to curry favor. Like when he's sitting there with Dunk talking about their potential future, and he says, I'll go to the Lord of the Land and I'll get the hand of his second most beautiful daughter. And Dunk's like, why don't you want the most beautiful? And he says, because you'll have her. She'll be betrothed to you. What a silver-tongued thing to say. Something you would think you would hear Littlefinger saying. And I think that shouldn't be dismissed. Dunk would never gas someone up like that. That is a very interesting character trait indeed. So again, I'm not saying that Aeg is evil or necessarily a bad person, right? But he's definitely got the blood of the dragon in him, whether he likes it or not. And I think only a fool would not watch him carefully. Although, I don't think I'd call Dunk a fool, but he is very trusting, which Aeg is taking advantage of. I mean, Aeg was going to kill his enemy in his sleep. He's a very complex and interesting character. And that makes him so interesting standing next to Dunk. As a contrast, as Dunk could not be simpler. He does what's right. From a writing perspective, this is an excellent setup. Good job once again, George. Dunk and Aeg are opposites in every possible way. Simple versus complex. Adult versus child. Flea bottom versus the Red Keep. But both are experienced only in different areas. Dunk is more worldly, and he knows very much what it means to be a knight, perhaps more so than anybody on the in the whole world of Game of Thrones. Although people say Brienne is his descendant, and she has the same code, unflappable code. Well, that's interesting. Well, Egg knows more about the aristocracy and how nobility interacts, right? And on that note, a different kind of fighting, diplomacy and intrigue, right? So it makes them the perfect team and reflections of each other. It's just very interesting. Men have been having a tough time lately in popular culture. And I think that one reason, out of many, that A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms has been so well received is that it depicts men as how they'd like to be seen and how they'd actually like to be. We've seen a lot of Westerns and military movies about what it means to be a man and the bond between men. But medieval stories that feature knights tend to have them in the background or as, extensions of the characters, like, I'll send a knight to do this. Or you see them as individuals. To see a story about knights together, I'm sure maybe some of you have been like, I read a book or so. I don't think there have been any movies or shows like this. Probably books. Look at this one. But I don't think in movies or shows, really. Not like there have been Westerns and military stories. So to see that same kind of story done with knights, I think is both very familiar and very refreshing at the same time. I just couldn't love it more. Dunk gets into this mess at the tournament for the purest of reasons, the most knightiest reason there is, and that is a damsel in distress, an innocent. Although, when we discover in the flashback that this has sort of happened to him before, he doesn't want to make the same mistake. Well, it wasn't really a mistake, but he was powerless to do anything about it when he was young. But now he's bigger, and he doesn't want to have what happened to Tansel, what happened to Rafe. Great casting on Rafe, by the way. She felt like she leapt off the page of Absolute Batman as a young Selena Kyle. She was great. Dunk is so pure of heart, I love this, that he not only believes in the legend of what a knight should be, but he therefore personifies it. And he is like a mirror that is held up to other knights. And I think that's part of where his power comes from. Because a lot of knights, when they look into the mirror that is Dunk, they don't like what they see looking back at them. They see the knight that they should be. And that's why Baelor decides to join him. So yes, let's talk about Baelor and the Trial of the Seven. Much like that famous and instantly iconic scene in Saving Private Ryan, which changed warfare movies forever, well, I'm sure there were realistic ones behind that, but that was a real turning point. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, Trial of the Seven, although I think they kind of personify this with, I forget the name of the knight with missing an eye. They really made it clear, even leading up to that battle, that you could get very injured as a knight. But I think that this Trial of Seven really took the romanticism and idealism out of medieval battle, not just for us, but for Dunk, right? He was like, oh, this is getting real fast. Not to say there isn't a little romanticism and idealism still there. A few knights join the fight to be immortalized in song because there hasn't been a Trial of Seven in 100 years. And also, there's some idealism, I think, at play. People always usually fight for something. Even if it's not what inspires them to initially, they find something that make it, to make them feel that it was worth it in the end. Baelor himself is a man torn. And I think it's no accident that even though he's a Targaryen, he doesn't have white hair. His son has a little patch of it, which I think is interesting. That's another very deliberate, interesting choice. But I think that's to show that Baelor has still held on to some of his humanity and is not, as Raymond puts it, an incestuous alien. To see how people feel about the Targaryens, the everyday man, I think has been really interesting on this show to get that perspective. But Baelor loves his family. And I think he also, in his heart, he loves his family. And intellectually, he knows that his family is the source of his station and his power. And I think, therefore, he lets him get away with things that go against his oath as a knight. Also, he's the hand of the king. And I think he's disappeared more into that role than being a knight, which is a more morally gray zone, right? Where you're sworn to protect the king, right? And the royal house, not every innocent. But then here comes that mirror in Dunk. And I think Baelor sees that he's fallen short as a knight. And that's why Baelor takes a stand against his own family in the trial of 7. I loved when the crowd went wild and the Game of Thrones theme song came up. That was incredible. But not as incredible as the chunk missing out of the back of his head at the end of the fight, instantly becoming one of the classic Game of Thrones moments of all time, the greatest moments, due to its simplicity, the visual shock of when Baelor turns around. That was a really big chunk. And then also Bertie Carvel's heartbreaking performance. That was just, and also I have to give kudos to the other actors in the scene. You know, they say a lot of acting is reacting, and those reactions were great. They weren't too overstated, but they were just right. But I wondered, was Sir Lionel correct in the final episode? Was Baelor a fraud who charged into a battle where he was in no real danger because he was fighting his family in the Kingsguard, so that's why the gods took him? Well, I would say the gaping hole in the back of Baelor's head says different. He was in danger. And despite what Maekar says about, everyone's going to always say I killed my brother intentionally, I'm like, well, you didn't pull your punches, buddy. And it seems your brother did because you only have a small little cut on your nose. So I think, Dunk's a nicer person than I. I guess I'm a little, I don't know. Maybe they should have gotten another Targaryen. Raymond would have said it. Maybe I'm a foss away. I do have green on of the Green Apple group. All right, so there's another great line at the funeral for Baelor afterwards, where the son points out that many sons die in their father's armor, but Baelor died in his son's armor. Oh, so good. Oh my goodness. Ira Parker just must be like frolicking in the words of George R.R. Martin as he reads the novella and is like, I'll use that line and that line. And the fact that Ira Parker can add additional material that's just as good, Ira Parker should be very proud of that. But yeah, so his son asks, why would the gods kill someone who was supposed to be a great king, but yet spare a lowly hedge knight? All right, let's talk about that. The trial of 7 is indeed a brutal battle, particularly, for Baelor, obviously, as well. But wow, does Dunk take a ridiculous amount of punishment? I think it's so shocking that that's all you focus on the first time you watch it. But then when it aired, I was watching screeners, but when it aired that night, I saw a lot of people saying, how the heck is Dunk still alive? And I thought that when I watched the episode again, I was like, that lance to the gut, that should kill you. I can't believe he's still alive. And even in episode 6, Sir Lionel's maester says, I'm sorry, sir, this man's dying. There's nothing I can do for him. I loved it when Sir Lionel was like, he's horrible. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That was great. But yes, Dunk survives. And it occurred to me that the only way Dunk could survive these injuries was if the gods had picked him. Isn't that great? But why? Why would they pick Dunk? Well, it was men who said Baelor was destined for greatness, not the gods. And Baelor certainly wasn't bold. I didn't see him saving anyone. Look at how he was allowing Egg to be tortured by his brother. And he didn't step up to help Dunk until Dunk inspired, or let's say guilted him into doing it. Baelor himself also said that the realm needs good men. And perhaps the gods agreed with Baelor that they needed good men. And that's why they spared Dunk. Also, as Dunk himself says, because this very question is gnawing away at him, perhaps his hand or his foot, the two parts of his body that he struck Aerion with, which would have been taken from him, will be needed someday. Maekar laughs that off. But I'm like, you don't know what show or what world you're in, Maekar. I mean, look at how Hodor paid off down the line. I think this is definitely something we should keep an eye on. Always remember about Dunk's hand and foot. That's going to be amazing. Hopefully, Dunk will become a bit of a better knight. I mean, the difference in skill level between him and Aerion is something else that people really commented on. It's striking. But when he gets up that second time, where he seems like he's dead, right? The look on Aerion's face, I think not only does Aerion realize that he might die in this fight. Dunk at first I thought cut an artery in his leg, but he must not have, because Aerion would have bled out very quickly. But I think in that moment when Dunk gets up yet again, that Aerion realizes that the gods might have chosen Dunk, right? Because he just will not go down. I think that's very interesting. And so what does that say about Aerion, who always feels he is the chosen one? He is a dragon living in human form, yet he was not chosen by the gods in this fight. Aerion, they said, has gone off, and I do wonder if they'll continue to explore that character, since they're going to send someone to go after Egg. Maybe it'll be Aerion, right? That would be interesting. That's who, if I were Ira Parker, I trust Ira Parker, but I'd be mighty tempted to send Aerion after him. All right. And the Dunk, so that's interesting. And the Dunk will not kill Aerion, right? But instead drags him to the podium to withdraw his accusation. He doesn't say he will yield to the public. First he says, I yield, I think. But then he says, I withdraw my accusation. And it was hard for him to get those words out, right? But then, so Dunk wouldn't kill him. And Dunk's first question after the battle is, did anyone die? Which I think really goes to show not only his incredible character, but perhaps in the future, his Achilles heel. As Rafe told him so long ago, when you hurt someone, they never get over it. Remember that with Aerion, right? Maybe he should have killed him on that battlefield. They hurt you back, right? A lesson, and also that's something to be said between Aerion and Egg. Aerion has hurt Egg very much, and Egg is not getting over it. A lesson she herself tragically learned by pushing that City Watch member one too many times. That was just tragic. Very good. Again, very good job by that actress. She had one episode, not even the full episode. And I think she really made a lasting impression. I loved that during the Battle of the Seven, Dunk kept imagining Arlan telling him to get up. Sure, Arlan was difficult and tough, but sometimes that's what you need. And if you yell at someone or, let's say, teach them something enough times, I think with repetition, it becomes ingrained in them, as it did in Dunk. And even though Arlan's no longer there to shout it, Dunk still hears the words. He still shouts it at himself, right? And I think so to some degree, Sir Arlan did train him, right? Just in his own special way. And perhaps it's also Sir Arlan's spirit. As they say, we live on through others. And Arlan definitely lives on through Dunk, as evidenced by that beautiful scene where Dunk puts a penny in a tree. Now, why didn't Sir Arlan knight Dunk? It's the last question that Dunk ever asks him. That was amazing. And I love that they saved it for the end. The way they weaved this story here was just so beautiful. Again, both to the credit of George R.R. Martin and Ira Parker. But I love that Dunk and we don't ever get a concrete answer, because sometimes you don't in life. And also sometimes the person themselves doesn't even really know. If I had to wager a guess, I would say that the reason Sir Arlan didn't knight Dunk was because, for two reasons. I think on the surface of it, he kind of felt that Dunk was maybe too innocent, too naive to really be an effective knight, and that it would put him in great danger. And I think that it does to a degree. And we'll see how things go, right? But then also, I think deep down, to knight Dunk would have signaled the coming of the end for Sir Arlan, right? That circle of life, as I said. And I don't think Arlan was the type of man who could face that. He died mid-sentence. Well, he came back just to finish the story. That was great. He says a knight always finishes his story. And I think that's part of what inspires Dunk to say he will take Egg on. Not just because he wants to save Egg from becoming like his brother, but also, a knight always finishes his story. And what is their relationship but a story? Dunk wants to finish what he started. And so I think that's part of it. I like that the show leaves things open-ended, right? Are the things that happen here the will of the gods? Or as that City Watch member says in another great line in that flashback, sometimes it's just life. I think it's somewhere in between, which is what I think George R.R. Martin so skillfully gets across. What do you think? Okay, a couple of final thoughts about the season. So how great was it when we saw the Red Keep in the distance? It was like a jump cut at the beginning of that flashback. You're like, oh my goodness, there it is. And it was just so beautiful. I was surprised at my emotional reaction to seeing it. It was like seeing a Disney castle in the distance, or Hogwarts. I was going to say Avengers Tower, but I don't have the same feeling of power and warmth. I don't know. Such horrible things happen at the Red Keep, but for some reason, how did you feel when you saw it? I was, again, surprised at my the emotions it triggered in me, I guess we could say. And it made me feel that just like the Harry Potter theme parks have turned out so well, I think that they really should do something at some point with Game of Thrones. And again, why we're so frustrated that Universal couldn't really compete in the war for Warner Brothers. But still, maybe they could lease it out to them, just like they do Harry Potter down the line. I also applaud this show for finding incredible new talent, a former rugby player for Dunk and the son of a former boy band member for Egg. And then also giving them tremendous support with these fantastic character actors. Bertie Carvel, of course, a home run. I was already familiar with his greatness before this show. But I think two other actors contributed a lot here in particular. Sean Thomas as Raymond Fossaway, the best friend you could ever ask for, personified. Oh, it was so good. And I'm glad he got a happy ending, literally, right? Although I thought it was funny when he's like, oh, she's already showing with a child. And it was very nice that Dunk knew enough not to break that fantasy. But then also, I thought the scene with them, with the horse was really moving. Just, just the love between the two of them, such good friends. And that Raymond would get to live out his days on an orchard. I mean, that just really did sound very lovely. And then, of course, Daniel Ings, who I'd seen before, but never, I think, operating at this level as Sir Lionel Baratheon. And how fitting that it was both of these men who one knighted the other to help Dunk. I mean, chills when that happened. That was just right on the battlefield. Like, come on, knight me, let's go. I mean, that was amazing. I think they really were the three good friends here, right? Egg is more, he's a child. It's a different kind of a situation, but these three men, it's just a beautiful friendship. And I also appreciated, by the way, because the relationship with Sir Lionel is complex, right? Because he's clearly, at the very least, bisexual. And I thought that the show handled that in a really sophisticated way. I thought his early flirtations with Dunk were extremely well done and realistic. The way LGBTQ men, I'd be interested to hear those of you in that community speak on this. But, I think from an outsider's perspective, I thought it seemed very well done in how these men, kind of like test the boundaries, see what's up, see maybe if you're game, right? And just, also, even if you're not, there's some attraction there, clearly. I think Sir Lionel Baratheon definitely likes Dunk in that way, right? But I think he also, I think Dunk, I don't think is worldly enough to understand what's happening, really. So that's what makes their dance in particular so interesting. And I don't think that Lionel ever really gets a clear answer on it either, which is very interesting. I mean, he invites Dunk to come live with him, which I think it was great. And so also, speaking of the Baratheons, in addition to Renly, I have seen some chatter online that it seems that a number of Baratheons are, let's say, somewhere in the middle of the Kinsey scale. So I thought that was just really great. I mean, I think that their dance together in that whole evening, when they end up drinking together and stuff like that, was also, I think, an instantly iconic Game of Thrones moment. Just one of the greatest moments of the show. Now, this season focused almost exclusively on men, but if they continue to follow the books, there will be a very strong female character in the second season, Lady Rohanne Webber, aka the Red Widow. I'll be curious to see how the show handles that and how people react to it because, I think it'll very much change the way the show is, the space that, again, it's a Western. There are female characters in Westerns, less so in military movies, but that'll be very interesting to see. At this point, I very much trust Ira Parker, and I'm curious to see what he does. And he has, at least for now, George R.R. Martin's seal of approval. Okay, so what did you think of this first season of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms? When did you decide it was a great show? Who were your favorite characters, and what were some of your favorite moments? And which moments do you think became instant, iconic Game of Thrones moments? I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the questions, what is a Targaryen, and what makes a good knight? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.